the fault, I would say, on technology leaders, on maybe IT as an organization, is not taking the time to ask why. Like if somebody's not using the system the way we intended it to be used, or using some sort of offline workaround, we should be spending time to understand, like, why is that? My mom's by nature a very quiet person, but she's never going to be the loudest person in the room. But I also learned from her that you can still be a very effective leader, even though you're quiet, right? You don't have to be that loud sort of type A personality that's going to walk into a room and dominate the conversation to be a leader.
Welcome to the Change Agent Podcast. My name is Nathan Lesnosky. I am your host. This is the podcast where we talk about the transformative leaders who are taking their business to the next level, that are translating the mission of their business into greater capabilities with technology. And we're going to dig into some really awesome topics today. We've had awesome guests on this program. We have talked about the transformation of healthcare, about DevOps. We've talked about security and data. We talked about armored cars. We talked about the boat business and how they're looking at technology. And this is going to be no different. A really fantastic conversation with a great person and great leader, Antony D'Cruz. Antony is the Senior Vice President of IT and PMO at HSA Bank. And he is doing lots of interesting things within the tech community, both at HSA and within the United Way community. Welcome to the program today.
Thank you, Nathan. Glad to be here.
So I'm glad that you're here.
Yeah.
Just tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What makes you who you are?
What makes me who I am? Yeah, so as you mentioned, Senior Vice President of IT and PMO at HSA Bank. We're a bank based here in Milwaukee that specializes in consumer-directed healthcare accounts. So think of things like a health savings account, a flexible spending account. HSAs, that's where the name comes from. So things that are typically tied to your benefits in some way, and usually have special tax treatments associated with them. And really our mission is to help people save and spend their healthcare dollars more wisely. I've been with the bank about 4 years now. Prior to that, spent a number of years mostly in the manufacturing, industrial engineering industry, both here in the US and also spent some time overseas. Always kind of in the IT field. Started my career as a developer and still enjoy digging into some of those details when I get a chance.
Oh, awesome. How would you contrast that switch? Actually, you had been in manufacturing and a whole lot of really interesting challenges there, into a really important mission, helping people with the financials associated with healthcare. What's that switch like, and how would you contrast those two domains from a technology perspective?
Yeah, no, definitely. In some ways, very, very different. When I was working in manufacturing and industrial engineering, a lot of focus from a technology perspective was saying, yep, we need to keep systems up and running. But at the end of the day, job one is making sure a product ships out the door. In banking and in the financial services industry, your product is technology, right? If your systems aren't available, you're essentially shut for business, right? Nobody's going back and writing in a ledger to, kind of do debits and credits in a ledger anymore. I think from that aspect, definitely a huge switch. But in a lot of other areas, I've also found a lot of commonality and a lot of lessons that I learned in manufacturing that are just as applicable in terms of running IT systems, running an IT organization, almost like a factory, right? We've got work that comes in, and we have to deliver that for our customers as an IT, as a technology organization. And so kind of running that through, when you kind of step back and look at it conceptually, and a lot of things that we talk about today in technology with Agile, and we talk about Kanban boards and all of those things, actually have their roots in manufacturing. They go back to lean manufacturing principles. We talk about lean software engineering, lean portfolio management, and all the principles you can, when you start reading about it and going back into the history of it, came out of the manufacturing space and the whole Toyota production system that became kind of the de facto standard in how you run manufacturing. So it's kind of funny when you start getting into this and go, I remember being in a plant 20 years ago and getting trained on Kanban and lean manufacturing systems, and it's a lot of the same stuff when you're talking about software delivery. Who would have thought, right? So yeah, a lot of similarities there in that aspect.
So you can pull that in to how you organize the IT organization to make them more lean and more and more rapid in the way that they deliver their capabilities to their internal customers and efficient and so on.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I joined HSA Bank at a time where, the bank had been growing tremendously, and I think was at an inflection point in the sense of, just realizing that growth and some of the systems, the processes that had sustained the bank up to that point weren't necessarily going to be able to sustain us going forward.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, I think some of my experience having worked in much larger organizations, with just knowing how to run IT at scale and build an IT organization with the processes, with the structure, to support kind of the ongoing growth. And that's been a lot of my focus the last few years as I've been in this role.
And maybe the things to avoid, right?
And maybe the things to avoid. Hopefully I've been able to avoid some of the mistakes that I've made and I've seen in the past.
What do you think? What do you think were the most important things that were instrumental in creating an organization that can scale for you at HSA?
Yeah, I think a few things. It's you've got to start slow, right? And to get fast, you kind of have to start slow, and you have to kind of focus on the basics. You're not going to be, when we talk about agile software, velocity and agile delivery and stuff like that, just realizing that you're not going to achieve those high levels of velocity when you start. So it's really the crawl, walk, run thing, and getting the team and getting the organization to realize that we've got to start slowly, kind of build that muscle memory of how do we do this, and you really want to focus on that because you want to get it right. Maybe kind of use the sports training analogy is, whatever you're in, like if you're learning how to swim, like if you want to get into competitive swimming, you want to make sure that you're learning the strokes right in the beginning. Because if you don't, then you're more than likely you're going to hurt yourself when you try and get into competitive swimming. So,
you mean not like I did, right?
I think we've all been there, right? Yeah. We want to be. I used to play tennis growing up, and you watch the great tennis players, and they're serving at 100 miles an hour, and like I want to do that, right? And then you try and do it, and you go, "Ow, probably shouldn't have done that."
That didn't work.
Right? that didn't work so great. So it's kind of focusing on the basics and then building from there, which sometimes is hard for an organization, because everyone wants to get there right away. And like, come on, we can, why do we need to spend time doing all this? So that I think is one of those things that hopefully I've brought, and I know I've learned from my past of, start slow, kind of build from there, and then the velocity will come.
Developing the sort of institutional muscle memory in a way.
Exactly. Yep. That's a really good way of putting it. Absolutely.
So when you think about the institutional muscle memory, how much of that is people and the way that they need to work together to establish a rhythm and a culture and a way that we get things done here in an efficient way? And how much is it the combination of that with well-documented processes that are leaned out? Like, and if an optimized process matched with optimized people, or does that kind of help me with that breakdown? Yeah, it definitely is a combination, right? I think especially when you're starting and you're trying to teach people a new way of behaving, a new way of operating, having those documented processes are always helpful. Because it serves as a training tool. It serves as a reminder for folks. It can also serve as kind of a checklist or guardrails
to make sure that, hey, have we checked all the boxes, right, before we release software into production. So I think it's definitely helpful. Over time, then that becomes ingrained in people,
Right.
right? And then you don't really have to kind of stop and check every box on the list, because people kind of know and they're able to kind of run through it almost automatically without really become second nature. But still, it's having those processes are also really helpful, because you're always bringing new people onto the team. People are moving into new roles, and then you get into situations in terms of just backups and redundancy, right? Joe's always the one that does this. Joe knows how to do it great, but he's out today, and now somebody else is stepping in. It's great to have those processes documented, so that somebody else can step in, pick it up, and run with it with the same quality that Joe's always done it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How much of moving into HSA was empowering people, enabling them to be the best versions of themselves and to take on new roles, or take on roles that you're creating for them, or like moving the people into a new directional space?
Yeah, and that's always been important for me in all of my leadership roles, right? Just giving people the opportunity, because I truly believe that instinctively everyone wants to do the right thing all the time, and everyone comes to work every day wanting to do a good job, right? And so if you provide them with the vision of the why, right? Why is this important? And the tools, the training that they need, people will step up, right? And so I've always tried, as they come in, to really adopt that philosophy of listen, learn, lead, right? First of all, kind of listen to the people that have been there, the people that have been doing this job for a while, right? To understand, um, what's going well, where their challenges are, because that's where I think when you think about trying to improve processes, improve throughput, is understanding from the people actually doing the job, like, hey, where are you having those challenges? And if something's not working right, it's usually either because the process isn't right, or there's no process defined, or perhaps the people haven't been provided with the right training or the right tools to do it, right? It's almost never because somebody just doesn't feel like doing it, or they want to do it wrong, right? So I think giving people that empowerment, trusting in them, right, and then asking them, like, hey, what do you need, right? If this is what we want to achieve, right, what do you think? How should we go about this? Empowering them to be involved in defining the process, but then also asking them, right? Well, what do you need? This is what we want to achieve. Like, what do you need to be successful? And I always view as myself, and I tell my team, right, my role as a leader is to remove those roadblocks and to provide the teams with what they need to be successful.
You just dropped like a huge dime there on the people instinctively want to do good work. They instinctively want to be the best version of themselves. Like, I think sometimes we miss that. Like, sometimes we just sort of like we sometimes, like, I say we as like a leader sometimes look at people and say, what can be cynical, right? They're not working that hard. They don't want to do good work. They don't want to do this. But that is a really strong point for us to remember always as leaders, that people instinctively want to be that best version of themselves, and if they're not, maybe it's on us to help them to have that opportunity.
Yeah, one of the lessons I learned pretty early in my career, right, and with software, right, and there was always and there always has been kind of this, call it complaint, gripe, or whatever, of, well, the user is just going around the system, but they're not putting the data in the right way in the system, or they're doing it outside the system. Right? That's always been with any large projects. And I think the fault, I would say, on technology leaders, on maybe IT as an organization, is not taking the time to ask why. Like, if somebody's not using the system the way we intended it to be used, or using some sort of offline workaround.
Mm-hmm.
We should be spending time to understand, like, why is that, um, and then try and address that issue, right? Because it's, if you make it easy for somebody to use the system, and, well, I shouldn't say that. I would say if you make it easy for somebody to get their job done, they're always going to instinctively choose that.
Right.
Just that, right? Nobody wants to come to work and do double work. Like, I got to put this data into this system, and then I got to go update that spreadsheet with the same information, right? If you just make it easy for them to do it the right way the first time, that's what everyone wants. So I think that's where I've learned in my experience, where maybe we've been a little blind, if from an IT organization, always looking at it and going, well, this, you should just be using the system. Why aren't you using the system?
Truly. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing about like shadow IT. Sometimes people are like, oh, that shadow IT out there is causing all these problems. Like, well, maybe that means I haven't enabled them right.
Exactly.
And I'm not even harnessing their unique capabilities to leverage technology in their job role right. Instead, I'm like sort of boxing them in.
Boxing them in, absolutely. Yeah. And I think some of those best ideas on how you can actually leverage technology and solve business problems come from organizations like that. And so, right, whether you call it shadow IT, I know that's, or it's, it's sort of the democratization of IT.
Yes.
Just, letting people out there, giving them the tools to use the best way they see fit.
I think that time is coming now where technology is a verb, not a noun. It's not a department anymore. Right?
Exactly.
It's like technology is part of the tools you use to get your job done.
I totally agree with that, and I think any leader in the organization, doesn't matter what function or what area you're in, everyone needs to have sort of that base level of technical competency or technical knowledge, because it is so pervasive. It is everywhere in our workplaces and our everyday lives, right? So yeah, there's no getting away from it.
So speaking of enablement, of helping people to be able to be empowered to do more, of giving them the right tools, you're involved in something that's really exciting we want to talk about, is the United Way, and particularly the United Way Tech for Good and Tech United Council.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you asked that. Yeah, so the Tech United is, I'll start there, is a donor group, part of the United Way here in Milwaukee and Waukesha County, that brings together technology professionals or people interested in technology, to figure out ways on how we can harness those professionals to support the mission and the work of United Way. And along with that, provide opportunities for tech professionals in our community to network with each other, to get to know each other. And one of the things that I'm really proud of that Tech United has done in the last couple of years is create something that we call the Tech for Good Marketplace. And really, this came out of an idea that another great company and great United Way supporter here in our community, Syslogic, and Tina Chang, they've been doing this for a while, right? Where they were offering pro bono services to agencies, and they were working with the United Way to identify agencies, nonprofit agencies, that needed help with something technology related, whether it was developing a database to keep track of their clients, or help with some projects like that. And so Syslogic had been doing that for a few years, working in partnership with the United Way. And that really kind of seeded the idea of saying, well, how do we scale that? How do we help? Because one thing that working with the United Way, we realized that a lot of these agencies, they're focused on doing just amazing work in the community, but technology is not a core competency for them. A lot of them don't have internal IT departments. They may have one or two people that kind of help set up their computers and printers and stuff like that. But they're all working on a shoestring budget. They really don't have the resources to invest in a lot of large IT systems or services. And so we said, how can we help? How can the members of Tech United help? And what it started with was actually something we call kind of the guest CIO program. And we started by partnering technology leaders with these agencies to help them just do an assessment of some of their current setup, what kind of technology they had in place, some of the challenges that they had, and then help them figure out some opportunities. A lot of times, these agencies weren't even aware of what was possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Working with lots of spreadsheets and documents and all of that, and a technology professional coming in and go, you know what? If we just set up a simple database and put all of this in, you could get all of these reports that you wanted in a matter of minutes, as opposed to hours that it was taking you to pull all this data together. Just simple things like that, just because they've never been exposed to those kind of capabilities, just didn't know what they didn't know. So we started with that. A couple of our members really took the lead there in developing playbooks and templates, right, to help with these guest CIOs go in and do their assessments. And then coming out of that, what we did was identify some opportunities, some projects that we could say, like, hey, this agency needs some help just setting up a wireless network.
Got it.
Right? Or they need some help. They've got a really aging on-prem email system, and they're just looking to move it to Office 365, kind of subscription-based, something like that. And then we kind of put that out to our member groups, to companies that we work with, that United Way supporters, to say, hey, is there somebody out there that can help this agency with this? And we put it out to different companies, individuals for some smaller projects, or like I said, just groups of individuals, and we had some really good success with that. And now, right now, what we're doing is really trying to look at how we scale that up to the next level, right? To identify other resources, people like project managers, business analysts, resources like that. What we're hoping to build is kind of a roster of saying, hey, these are experienced project managers in our community that are willing to volunteer their time.
Mm-hmm.
So if an agency has a project that they're running, and they just need somebody to help them run the project, to come up with a plan, help them execute the project, that we've got somebody who's willing to spend a few hours a week helping them do that. Also, companies like Six Logic and others that have come up and said, hey, we're willing. We'll offer some of our employees time to do some of this development effort. We had a couple of projects recently, pretty basic things, just setting up SharePoint sites.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've also been trying to partner with colleges in the area, looking at, as part of the coursework, right, having teams of students take on some of these initiatives, either on a volunteer basis or part of their coursework. So I think one of the great things that United Way is able to do is to connect different stakeholders, right, to see a broader need in our community, and say, okay, how can we solve for this? Because individually, we can do quite a bit to help in our community, but when you bring these different stakeholders together, then you can really make a multiplier effect in our community.
That's really a smart idea, because so often I think the connections that are made in nonprofit space is, I just happen to know this guy,
Absolutely,
gal or person,
Yep.
whoever I'm working with, and the only way you even know about, and it might not even be a fit,
Yep.
right? But like, the only way you know about those connections is if you just happen to know and are talking with someone about it.
Yep.
And there's so much more good that could be done if we simply knew about the opportunities and connect people who are willing with opportunities where they can help.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
that's a perfect way to be able to kind of bring those two willing parties together to create something that wouldn't have gotten done because they just didn't know about each other.
They just know about each other. Absolutely. Right. And I think it also, is a great way, because I would say the membership of Tech United really is a group of people that are passionate about technology, and they're also passionate about doing good in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And so this provides for them as well kind of that avenue to say, hey, how can I use, as a technology professional, how can I use my skills, my talents, in a way, right? I mean, everyone does, and it's awesome that people go, and serve at a soup kitchen, or they're packing meal kits. I mean, all great stuff. But I think a lot of technology professionals are going like, okay, I've got these unique skills.
Mhm.
How can I leverage that to help in our community?
Totally, it's like Doctors Without Borders
For technology.
for
For
technology,
technology, right? Exactly.
which
Yep.
is exciting, right? Because yeah, we can all do things that we all should do,
Exactly.
right? But in addition to that, doing things where we have unique skills is an area where there's scarcity. And
Yep.
if we can provide that to help accelerate these activities, man, that's a great way to bring it together.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You're also involved in an area where you're not only helping the nonprofits to execute, but also talking about how United Way can help lift up those who need additional assets or capabilities in the community. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, yeah. So that is another initiative area of our United Way called Tequity. And really, Tequity is focused on bridging or addressing issues of the digital divide in our community. And again, I think a lot of this came out of the pandemic, where when schools went virtual, schools shut down, right? MPS, all the schools in the area switched to online classes. But what quickly became apparent is that not all the students had devices or access to be able to participate in those online classes. And so there was a bit of a scramble early on during the pandemic where the United Way tried to step in and quickly source equipment, laptops, hotspots, those kinds of things, and did a nice job working with MPS and other schools in the area to get those distributed to primarily focused on school age students. But what I think that brought to the forefront was there's a larger issue here with access to technology in terms of equipment. A lot of households only had cell phones, right? And while those cell phones, they have data plans, and you can do a lot on a smartphone, but not the best for learning if you're trying to go to school, whether that's K through 12 or even college. Um, and unfortunately, there's a lot of services out there which may or may not be available online. If they are available online, definitely not optimized for a smartphone experience, right?
Yeah.
So still very sort of PC browser based experiences. Um, and then connectivity was the other issue, which unfortunately, right, what I realized, and I think a lot of people realized, is that that broadband connectivity that a lot of us kind of take for granted, that we have at home and we have at work, just isn't available in all parts of our community. Um, and and then there's just the ability or the training, right? A lot of people just having never had the opportunity or never being exposed to technology just really struggled with um, trying to figure things out. I think back to the early days of the pandemic, and a lot of us struggled with Zoom and Teams and all of that, right? You're on mute, right? I think we still hear that.
Yeah, teachers and students alike, right?
Teachers and students alike. So it was all these aspects. It was equipment, connectivity, and ability. And so really, Tequity is focused on trying to address all of those aspects. And then in addition, the advocacy, because there are resources available. The federal bill that was recently passed, the Infrastructure Improvement Bill, actually has funding within it to expand broadband access. And that's great. But knowing how to tap into those funds and how do you apply for those, who's eligible, how do you so that's another area which through Tequity, the United Way is trying to step up and help address. And again, focusing on what they do best, which is bringing kind of this diverse group of stakeholders, right? Understanding what the needs are in the community, finding partners that can fill those needs, advocating both at the state and local level, to get the support, to get the funding for those kinds of things. So yeah, that's another great initiative. I think that the United Way has been really ramping up on trying to expand that. And I think back to what we were talking about earlier, it's just I think becoming so apparent that that base level of technical skills and technical competency is so important, regardless of what you're going to do in the future. I really view that technical skill as sort of the high school GED
Yeah, in
of
a
our day,
sense.
in a
Yes.
sense, right? If you don't have that, um, your options in terms of a career or job prospects are severely limited today, and I think are just going to be even more limited in the future.
Yeah, it was surprising for me, and I suppose I should have known this, right? But it was surprising to me to realize how much the lack of tech accessibility was a problem. I mean, living out in the middle of nowhere like I do and still having broadband,
Right.
and you know, having in many ways like a very privileged existence. My daughter taking a college class online from
Yep.
her own room, and like this is pretty, like, you forget that all that investment goes there because those are the people that can pay the
They
bills,
can pay the bills.
right?
Yep.
But there's this whole other set of people that you're talking about that like they can't pay the bills, or they're in different life situations that the kids or people who are trying to upskill into this workspace, like they should have as much opportunity as everyone should have.
Absolutely, right, and that's where I think the United Way is trying to help to get some of that investment, right, to encourage that investment or fund through bills like this infrastructure improvement bill to get the funding so that some of that basic infrastructure, that broadband access, is available in all neighborhoods, and then people have the equipment that they need, and also they have access to the training so that they know how to use the equipment, know how to use the technology that's available to them,
especially in professional sense.
Exactly, right, and yeah, it's so this was something that started out of need, focused on schools and school age kids, but has really grown from there. Because if you think about it, applying for a job today, almost everywhere, it doesn't matter what job it is, they're asking people to apply online.
Yeah.
Right. Even those first interviews.
Do you have a LinkedIn account, right?
Right. Do you have a LinkedIn account? Go on the website and submit your application there. The first interviews are being done over Zoom calls or Teams calls, right? So even though things have opened back up for the most part coming out of the pandemic, but a lot of those things that we put in place because of the pandemic have stayed in place.
Even that's a disparity, right?
Right.
Okay, let's say the first interview's over a Zoom call.
Yep.
You got candidate one who's sitting in a private room, got a nice gear, on broadband, dressed up nice.
Yep.
And then you've got another person who doesn't have all those amenities, and they're trying to compete in a look and see kind of world with this other person. And this lack of tech equity again is like an impact on them.
Absolutely, right. They may be sitting at their dining room table trying to do this call, and have other members of their family walking around behind them or whatever. And you're absolutely right. That impression that conveys between candidate one and candidate two, and a lot of hiring managers, a lot of companies are going to go, I think I'm going to go with the other candidate who's got the setup at home, because chances are that they may be thinking of, hey, this person either is going to be working remotely, or we want them to have the option to work remotely, and so where should I want? Do I want the person that has the nice setup at home and they're going to be able to work and focus, or this other person that might be distracted because they don't have the setup at home? So it's unfortunately, it's in a way, I guess, a little bit of potential discrimination that we all have to be sensitive to.
Absolutely. So all this stuff, man, is your leadership in the community, and that leadership as an inspiration to many of us other IT leaders who are thinking about how we can bring not only the leadership we do in the business we're in, but into the broader community to rise all the ships.
Mm-hmm.
That is awesome. And can you tell us a little bit about who's inspired you to be able to have those qualities? I mean, both at what you're doing professionally, and then how you've translated that into that community leadership. Who's inspired you to do that?
Yeah, there've been quite a few people that have inspired me at different times in my career, but I think a lot of it goes back and starts with my parents. Very very different personalities. Right, my dad was always one that really talked about doing the right thing, doing it the right way, doing it for the right reasons, and fighting for what is right.
Mm-hmm.
Right, so that sense of um, when you're blessed with opportunity, when you're blessed with talent treasures, you have a responsibility to give back, to pay back. And part of the way you fulfill that responsibility is by fighting for what's right and doing what's right. And so I think that was probably some of my earliest inspiration. Some of my leadership inspiration, I would say, in addition to my dad, came from my mom. My mom's by nature a very quiet person, right? She's never going to be the loudest person in the room. But I also learned from her that you can still be a very effective leader, even though you're quiet, right? You don't have to be that loud sort of type A personality that's going to walk into a room and dominate the conversation to be a leader. Because there are many different leadership styles. Mm-hmm. And I found, for me at least, that quiet leadership, I feel can be a more sustainable style of leadership.
Very true.
So yeah, I think very early on, my maternal grandmother was another one. My maternal grandfather passed away suddenly at a pretty young age, leaving my grandmother with a single mom raising kids, and she had never worked outside the home before. But talk about needing to learn to be a leader. This was in the 1950s, early 1960s in Malaysia at the time, which was definitely a third world country, right? So talk about a single mom in a third world country at that time, needing to learn very quickly on how to be a strong leader.
Wow.
And provide for her family. So yeah, I was blessed in that sense growing up around some very strong female leaders, and being able to learn from my grandmother, my mother. But throughout my career, one person that comes to mind, I think in sort of I think of as my formative years as a leader, a gentleman named Jeff Edwards, who was the president of in Asia of our division, and he was another one that really for me exemplified that quiet leadership, but also that care for your people. And I think he's the one that I really saw modeling this principle of, if you take care of your people, the results will come. And if you empower the people, listen to your people, empower them, trust that they always want to do the right thing. And as a leader, you just have to figure out how to enable them to do the right thing. So Jeff was definitely someone. And then I've had a number of other leaders. My two of the leaders that I work for right now, Tim Patnod and Chad Wilkins at HSA Bank, I think also really embody a lot of those characteristics. And so that just on a daily basis just reinforces for me really the importance of some of those principles.
Man, those are all awesome stories, especially your talking about your mother. I think we may have the same mother. Very much so. Like my mother was very much a quiet leader, right?
Yep.
A person who was working very dutifully out of love for her family, in many ways behind the scenes, but she was the one who was really the heart of our family.
Absolutely.
And we would never have been the same, or she's still around, but we would not have been the same without her and the things that she was doing.
Yep. A lot of mothers are like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes thankless. And I appreciate too the comment you made about Sometimes it's not the like big leader who comes in and owns the whiteboard that is the sustainable leader. Sometimes you need
Yeah.
to combine those two personalities. You might need one, you might need another, and they might need to be together in order to be able to get some of the things you need done.
Right. I think that's the beauty, that's the benefit of when we talk about diversity, right? It's that diversity of thought, of approach as well, right? Because you're absolutely right. Sometimes you do need that strong, dominant kind of approach to really shake things up, to really rip up the playbook as it stands today and start again, combined with kind of the more quiet, measured approach of saying, hey, let's figure this out, kind of step by step, and put the processes, put the organization in place. So I think there's a place for all of that. It's just knowing which style to tap into at the right time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the program today. You are just a great leader, and I appreciate all the detail you went into.
Thank you very much. This was great. Great to be on, and yeah, I've loved listening to some of the earlier podcasts, and I look forward to the ones in the future.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and thank you to all of our guests and listeners for joining us today on the Change Engine podcast.